Some men spend their entire lives trying to be heard. Steve McQueen spent his trying not to be. I met him in the spring of 1966, Los Angeles, a sound stage at Warner Brothers, where he was finishing work on the Sand Pebbles. I wasn't there to interview him, not formally. Anyway, CBS was preparing a cultural piece on American masculinity in film, and McQueen's name kept coming up in our editorial meetings. The quiet anti-hero, the man who could say everything with a glance and nothing with his mouth. They told me he didn't like reporters, that he'd walk out of interviews, that he preferred motorcycles to microphones. I told them I'd observe, not interrogate. That's how I found myself standing in the corner of stage 12 on a Tuesday afternoon, watching him work. The set was dressed to look like a Chinese riverboat, all weathered wood and rope. McQueen stood near the bow in costume, dusty, tired, his face showing every year of hard living he'd packed into 36 years. Between takes, he smoked, not the way actors smoke for effect, but the way men smoke when they need something to do with their hands. He knew I was there. Everyone did, but he didn't acknowledge me until the director called for a 15-minute break. He walked over slowly, not friendly, not hostile, just careful. Cronkite, he said. Not a question, Mr. McQueen. He studied me for a moment, then motioned with his cigarette toward a door at the back of the sound stage. Quieter over there. I followed him into what turned out to be a small prop room, racks of uniforms, crates of period weapons, a card table with coffee rings. He leaned against a crate and lit another cigarette, even though the first one was still burning in his hand. You're not here to ask me about the movie, he said. No. Good. We stood there in silence. Not the awkward kind. The kind men fall into when they're both comfortable with not filling space. Outside, I could hear the crew resetting lights. Someone shouting about lunch. You want to know what it's like, he finally said. Being this thing they made me into. I hadn't asked a question, but he'd heard it anyway. I'm a mechanics kid from Missouri, he continued. Bounced around, reform school, merchant marine. Then suddenly I'm on magazine covers and everyone wants to know what I think about Vietnam, civil rights, the sexual revolution. Like because I played a gunslinger, I've got answers. He tapped ash onto the concrete floor. I don't have answers. I barely have questions. There was something in his voice, not anger. Exactly. Exhaustion, maybe. The kind that comes from carrying something too heavy for too long. When I was a kid, he said, my mother left me with her uncle. Then she came back. Then she left again. You learn pretty quick that the less you need people, the less they can hurt you. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was looking at the cigarette between his fingers, watching the smoke curl upward. Hollywood likes that about me. The loner thing. They put me on a horse or a motorcycle and tell me to look tough. Easy money. But here's what nobody gets. I'm not acting tough. I'm just not there. You understand? I learned a long time ago how to be in a room without being in it. I asked him, is that was lonely? He smiled, but there was nothing happy in it. Lonely is when you want company and don't have it. This is different. This is knowing that even when people are around, you're still by yourself. The cigarette had burned down to his fingers. He dropped it and crushed it under his boot. They want me to be this symbol, he said. American masculinity, the strong, silent type. Truth is, I'm not strong. I'm just quiet. There's a difference. Somewhere in that moment, I realized I wasn't interviewing Steve McQueen. I was witnessing something closer to a confession, not of any crime, but of a deeper kind of truth, the kind men of our generation rarely admitted, even to themselves. You know what the worst part is? He asked. The worship. People see me on screen doing something brave or cool, and they think that's who I am. They don't see the insomnia, The panic before a scene. The way I have to check the locks on my doors 3 times before I can sleep. They don't see that I'm terrified most of the time, not of anything specific. Just ... terrified. Like the ground could open up any second. He pulled out another cigarette, but didn't light it. I race motorcycles, he said. Fast. People think it's because I'm fearless. It's the opposite. When I'm going 130 miles an hour, there's no room for the fear in my head. It's just me and the machine and the road. For a few minutes. I'm not Steve McQueen, the movie star. I'm not Steve McQueen, the disappointment to his mother. I'm just ... moving. A bell rang outside, the signal that the break was ending. He straightened up, and just like that, something changed in his posture. The vulnerability I'd seen moments earlier disappeared behind a mask I recognized from his films. Composed, controlled, unreachable. You can't use any of this, he said. Not for your piece. Not for anything. I told him I wouldn't. Why not? He asked. There was genuine curiosity in his voice. Because some things aren't meant for broadcast, I said. Some things are just between men who happen to be in the same room. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're not like the others, he said. Neither are you. He almost smiled at that. Almost. We walked back onto the sound stage together. The crew was ready. The director was calling for positions. McQueen handed his cigarette pack to a young assistant and moved back to his mark. When the cameras rolled, he became someone else entirely, or maybe he became no one at all. That strange alchemy actors perform, turning themselves into vessels. But I saw something different now. What America loved about Steve McQueen, the stoicism, the independence, the refusal to explain himself wasn't strength. It was survival. He'd learned as a boy that the world was unreliable, that people left, that showing need was dangerous. So he'd built himself into a fortress, impenetrable, admired, alone. And America, in 1966, loved him for it. We were a country that prized toughness, that celebrated the man who needed nothing and no one. We were waist deep in Vietnam, marching through civil rights battles, grappling with assassinations and riots. We wanted heroes who didn't flinch, who didn't cry, who could take a punch and walk away without a word. Steve McQueen gave us that image. But the image was a lie, or at least an incomplete truth. Behind it was a man who couldn't sleep, who raced motorcycles to quiet his mind, who carried his childhood like a stone in his pocket. I never did use a conversation in my piece. I reported on McQueen's films, his box office appeal, his place in American culture. But I left out the part that mattered, the part he'd trusted me with in that prop room. He died in 1980. Cancer, 50 years old. I read the obituaries. They called him an icon, a legend, the embodiment of cool. They talked about The Great Escape, Bullitt, The Magnificent Seven. They showed clips of him on motorcycles, in fast cars, squinting into the sun with that look that made women swoon and men want to be him. Not one of them mentioned that he was terrified, that he was lonely, that the silence we loved so much was never peace, it was armor. I think about that afternoon sometimes, the smoke curling in the dim light, the way he spoke about fear as if naming it might make it smaller, the way he disappeared back into his performance the moment someone called action. I think about all the men I've known who've done the same thing, built themselves into something they thought the world wanted, then spent the rest of their lives trapped inside that construction. It's a particularly American tragedy, maybe, this idea that to be a man means to need nothing, to feel nothing, to be made of stone. Steve McQueen wasn't made of stone. He was made of the same things we all are: hope and hurt, and the desperate need to be seen, really seen, by someone. But he never let most people get close enough to see it. Some men don't want to be understood. They just want the noise to stop. He found that silence, eventually. I just wish it hadn't taken dying to get there. And that's the way it is.